Greetings, welcome back. Eric's UK here with another vid. Today talking about another game that I have played, although not one for a long time. GURPS. A friend of mine on Facebook, Scotto, mentioned this in a post recently and it made me think, alright, let's do GURPS as your next one. So GURPS is a role-playing game published by Steve Jackson Games, and GURPS stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System. And it is a fairly chunky tome. I have a copy of the 3rd edition rules around here somewhere, I think, which was like early 90s. I don't know what edition the game is currently on. And it is a game system that is designed to accommodate whatever style game you want to play without having to learn a whole new system every time. So you could play a D&D-esque style fantasy campaign 1 month, swap to a Marvel Cinematic Universe style game the next, swap to a Call of Cthulhu, swap to a Star Wars, all without having to learn an entirely new system. I have only ever run GURPS twice, I think, maybe 3 times. I've played it a couple of times. Because one of the strengths of the game is there were, I don't know about now, but there were loads and loads of source books put out for it that covered every possible sort of thing you might want. Pardon me. So, for example, I had a book back in the day that was called GURPS Dinosaurs, which I don't think ever got reprinted. I sold my copy recently, actually, on eBay, which basically gave you stats for various prehistoric creatures, from like giant armoured fish all the way up to Cenozoic mammals, mammoths and the like, as well as giving you some rules for what conditions would be like in the various time zones, to do with the oxygen content or finding fresh food and water and anything like that. And contain a few ideas for like time travel and how else you might use dinosaurs in a campaign and so forth. But they had books for fantasy magic, they had science fiction, you had various equipment guides, there were settings. I think there's like a Vikings one, or they even did a couple of licensed things. They did a Vampire the Masquerade one, and a couple others. GURPS Space. I could go on and on and on. If you wanted a source book for a campaign or an idea that you were running, it existed. You could probably still find them on eBay or second-hand shops or something like that now. As a system, though, I always found it quite lacking. Any generic system has a problem in that it is bland, because it relies on you, the playgroup, or the GM, to input that into the game. And GURPS is fairly simple. Its character generation is entirely points based. Depending on the sort of level of character that the GM wants you to have for the campaign, you have a set number of points. You have to buy stats, you have to buy skills, you have to buy advantages, disadvantages. If it's a game that uses psionics or magic, you've got to spend points on your spells and psychic abilities. You've got backgrounds, so you determine how wealthy your character is, whether they're famous, infamous, whether they're short-sighted. You name it, it's all in there. And it's, as I recall, as I say, it's been a long time since I ran this or played this. It was a D6 system, which is fairly simple. But the game has no... As I said, there's no soul to it, unless you've got the right people who can bring it to it. GURPS also suffered slightly, I think, in some of its... how can I put it? For example, at one point back in the 90s, I was going to use GURPS to run a Star Trek Next Generation campaign. And so I went out and I bought GURPS Space, and I went out and bought GURPS Vehicles. And GURPS Space is really good. Rules, advantages, disadvantages, blah, 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 blah. Everything you want for a sci-fi space-based campaign, including basic rules for starship building, which is what I'd want the GURPS vehicles for in the end, so that I could build the appropriate ships within the game system. The problem is, and this is where I think GURPS also falls down, in order to build a vehicle using the system that GURPS uses, did I say that right? Vehicle, the system GURPS uses. You have to have a PhD in nuclear physics. It's an absolute nightmare for things like this. Instead of giving you sort of like a base shell of a set of stats, you've actually got to build your vehicle. You've got to set up a frame, and that frame has a weight and a mass. And as you add things to it, you can't exceed a certain value, or it adds to the mass and weight. And then you've got tech levels, which say, and even just designing something like an everyday modern city car was a nightmare. And I think this is one of the reasons why we kind of only ran a couple of campaigns. I mean, I ran a time travel alternate universe dinosaur campaign. I ran a fairly short but fun campaign based on the what's it called? It's gone out of my head now. It's one of these racing games on the PlayStation. I can't think of the name of it. I remember the big famous selling point for it was like the villain of the piece was like a giant ice cream truck. It'll come to me in a minute. But I ran a game like that where the players were members of a team on a racing circuit, and they had to try and build their own cars, which was a bit of a nightmare. We kind of had to fudge it. And I played in a couple of superhero GURPS games. And, and as I say, if you want a system that's basic and simple enough that you don't have to buy a new game when you want to play a different genre, GURPS is great for it. But as I say, it's lacking a soul. It's lacking every role-playing game that is designed and has an inbuilt sort of setting, whether that's Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, whatever. They've built either the game system around the setting, or they've been able to adjust a setting to fit around the system they've got. GURPS doesn't do that. GURPS just goes, here's a set of rules, play with it. It's got a lot of variety, versatility. It can cover anything that you want it to be, but you've got to put the effort in to make that setting or that system, or however you want to put it, work for you. And that's kind of my problem. I don't know whether now I would ever want to play or run that game again, because I prefer systems that are more flavourful. But GURPS has a good following. I think it's very much more an American style game than one you find here in the UK. I think it's much more popular over there for some reason than it is here, based on my experiences and talking to people. And maybe it's just a cultural thing of how we do things, I don't know. But anyway, that's just a quick thought on my thoughts on GURPS. Apologies if they're a little bit rambly. I'd love to know whether you've played GURPS or run it and what you think of the system. Do you find it lacking, or do you find it absolutely perfect for your needs? And I'd love to know what anyone else's thoughts were on the sort of like the vehicle construction rules and things like that. That quite frankly, I do think you needed to be an absolute genius in order to work it out. These days, you could probably find an app on the computer or on your phone that would do it for you, but there you go. Anyway, I look forward to seeing your comments in the little thread thingy below. Can't see my finger doing the whole pointy bit. Look, there you go. Anyway, thanks for watching. Take care, guys. Good gaming.